I knew the axe was falling the moment I walked into the conference room and smelled the distinct, cloying scent of desperation by Chanel coming off the new CEO. Claire, the founder's daughter and a woman whose business acumen was entirely inherited alongside her daddy's hairline, was sitting at the head of the table like she was waiting to order a mimosa at brunch. The air conditioner in the boardroom was humming a low, mournful tune, probably grieving the death of common sense in this building. I took my seat, placed my phone face down, and waited for the circus to start. It didn't take long. Claire didn't believe in warm-ups. She believed in disruption, which is corporate speak for I'm going to break things I don't understand and blame the IT department. She cleared her throat, a sound like a jagged pebble rattling in a tin can. Michelle, she said, flashing a smile that was all teeth and no warmth, like a shark that had just paid for veneers. We've been reviewing the Q3 operational redundancy metrics. It seems your position as chief infrastructure architect is, how do I put this, legacy baggage. I didn't blink. I've been in this game for 20 years. I've survived dot-com busts, housing crashes, and a marriage to a man who thought investment portfolio meant buying scratch-offs at the gas station. You learn to spot a hustler a mile away. Speaking of spotting things early, if you're digging this confession so far, go ahead and smash subscribe button and drop a like. It keeps the servers running, unlike what's about to happen in this story. Anyway, back to the execution. Legacy baggage, I repeated, my voice flat. It's a Texas drawl, slow and heavy, the kind that sounds polite until you realize it's wrapping around your throat. Is that what we're calling the financial backbone of this entire company now? Because last I checked, my baggage processes about $40 million a day in client transactions. Claire laughed. It was a practice sound, airy and dismissive, the kind of laugh you learn at a Swiss finishing school. Oh, Michelle, we're moving to the cloud. We're pivoting to a decentralized, AI-driven model. Your on-premise mindset is just cute, but it's obsolete. Effective immediately, your role is eliminated. She slid a manila envelope across the mahogany table. It stopped exactly 3 inches from my hand. The other board members, men I had made rich, men I had saved from federal audits, men who had eaten brisket at my backyard barbecues, stared at their shoes. Cowards, all of them. They knew what was coming and they let the net baby pull the trigger because they were terrified of her father, Harold. I didn't reach for the envelope. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I just looked at Claire, really looked at her. She was wearing a blazer that cost more than my first car, but she wore it like a costume. She didn't know how the sausage was made, she just liked eating the hot dog. You're firing me, I stated, not asking. I'm liberating you, she smirked, tapping her manicured nails on the table. Hand over your badge and laptop, Michelle. Security will escort you out. We need to focus on fresh energy. Youth, innovation. I stood up slowly. My knees popped. Reminder of 45 years on this earth, 20 of them spent hunched over server racks and coding until my eyes bled. I reached into my purse, pulled out my badge, and dropped it on the table. It made a plastic clack that echoed in the silence. Claire, I said, my voice dropping an octave. You have exactly 10 minutes. She blinked, her smile faltering for a microsecond. Excuse me? 10 minutes, I repeated. That's the heartbeat interval. You have 10 minutes before the servers I own, the ones you think are legacy baggage, stop receiving the handshake signal from my encrypted key. Once that signal stops, the transaction gateways lock down. Everything freezes. Payroll, vendor payouts, client processing, all of it. The room went deadly silent. Even the AC seemed to hold its breath. Don't be dramatic, Claire scoffed, rolling her eyes. IT has full control. We have passwords. You have passwords to the dashboard, I corrected gently. You don't have the lease to the engine. You see, Claire, you didn't read the founding documents. You didn't read the vendor contracts. You were too busy rebranding the logo to realize that North Star Systems doesn't own the transaction servers. I do. I turned to the rest of the board. I'd suggest you gentlemen check your email. I sent over the lease termination notice 5 minutes ago. Since my employment is the condition for the active lease and my employment just ended, I checked my watch. You have 7 minutes left. Get out. Claire shrieked, her face flushing a blotchy, ugly red. Get her out of here. Security. 2 beefy guards stepped forward. I didn't make them touch me. I smoothed my skirt, picked up my purse, and walked to the door. I paused with my hand on the brass handle. You might want to call your dad, Claire, I said over my shoulder. Tell him he owes me for the brisket. I walked out of that boardroom and into the hallway. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The carpet smelled like industrial cleaner and lies. I didn't look back. I walked straight to the elevator, pressed the button for the lobby, and waited. My heart wasn't racing. My hands weren't shaking. I felt a cold, calm clarity settling in my chest like a block of dry ice. They thought I was just an employee. They thought I was a line item on a spreadsheet that could be deleted to boost the quarterly bonus pool. They didn't understand that I wasn't just working at North Star Systems. I was North Star Systems, and they had just unplugged life support. I stepped into the elevator and watched the doors slide shut, cutting off the view of the receptionist who was frantically answering a ringing phone. The descent began, 10 floors down to the lobby. By the time I hit the ground floor, the first timer would expire. By the time I got to my car, the first client would get an error message. I walked out into the humid Texas heat. The sun was blinding, reflecting off the asphalt of the parking lot. I put on my sunglasses, tortoiseshell, polarized, expensive, and unlocked my truck. Yes, I drive a truck. In Texas, driving a Prius is considered a cry for help. I climbed into the cab of my F-150, tossed the severance envelope onto the passenger seat without opening it, and started the engine. I didn't go home. I wasn't going to hide and cry into a pint of Ben and Jerry's. I drove to a little dive bar 3 miles down the road, a place called the Rusty Anchor where the beer was cold, the floor was sticky, and nobody asked you about your KPIs. I ordered a bourbon, neat, and set my phone on the bar. I opened the timer app. 00:00:45 seconds. I took a sip of the bourbon. It burned, a good, clean burn that washed away the taste of Claire's perfume. I watched the seconds tick down. 3, 2, 1, 0. My phone didn't ring immediately. That's the beauty of a complex system failure. It's not an explosion. It's a suffocation. It starts quiet. A failed packet here, a timeout there. It ripples outward like a contagion. I signaled the bartender for another round. Keep 'em coming, Joe, I said. I'm celebrating. Oh yeah, Joe grunted, wiping a glass with a rag that had seen better decades. What's the occasion? Birthday? Better, I said, a slow smile spreading across my face. I just became the most expensive consultant in the state of Texas. The phone screen lit up. A notification from the internal Slack channel, which I hadn't been removed from yet because Claire's disruption team was too incompetent to revoke my credentials properly. System alert, critical gateway timeout. Error code, dead man switch, I chuckled. I had coded that error message myself 5 years ago, late one night after Harold had promised me that I would always be taken care of. I named it Dead Man because that's what a company becomes when it cuts out its own heart. The chaos was just beginning, and I had a front row seat, a full glass of whiskey, and absolutely zero intention of picking up the phone when it started to ring. To understand why Claire was currently staring at a red screen screaming about a dead man switch, you have to understand where North Star Systems actually came from. It didn't start in that glass and steel monolith downtown. It didn't start with venture capital funding or synergy meetings. It started in a garage in 2004, smelling of stale pizza and desperation. Harold Wells wasn't a bad man back then. He was just a guy with a vision for a logistics payment platform and a credit score lower than a snake's belly in a wagon rut. I was the one with the credit. I was the one with the technical chops. I met Harold at a networking event where he was trying to pitch his idea to a wall because nobody else would listen. I listened. And because I'm a glutton for punishment, I bought in. But I wasn't an idiot. Even back then, I knew that partnership is just a fancy word for future lawsuit. So when we built the infrastructure, I made a deal. Harold could have the brand, the client list, and the front-end software, the pretty buttons that the customers clicked. But the heavy lifting, the transaction servers, the encryption bridges, the actual metal boxes that processed the money, I bought those. Me, personally. I formed a separate LLC, Ironclad Holdings, and I leased the infrastructure back to North Star. It was a tax move at first, a way to protect assets. Harold loved it because it kept the debt off North Star's books while we were trying to get loans. He signed the Master Service Agreement, MSA, without even reading the fine print. The fine print said this: the lease for the critical infrastructure is valid only so long as Michelle Vance is employed as the Chief Infrastructure Architect of North Star Systems. Upon termination of her employment for any reason other than gross criminal negligence, the lease terminates immediately. For 20 years, that contract sat in a fireproof safe, gathering dust. North Star grew, we moved out of the garage, we hired staff, Harold got rich. I got comfortable, and then Harold got old and he decided to retire to a golf course in Florida, handing the keys to the kingdom over to Claire. Claire, who thought the cloud was actual magic and not just someone else's computer. Claire, who had spent the last 5 years finding herself in Bali on the company dime while I was pulling all-nighters patching security vulnerabilities. She hated me from day one. I represented everything she wasn't: competent, self-made, and essential. To her, I was just the grump in the corner office who said no to her expensive, stupid ideas. I sat in the bar, swirling the amber liquid in my glass, remembering the look on Harold's face when we landed our first $1 million client. He had hugged me, tears in his eyes, and said, "Michelle, you're the bedrock of this place. We don't exist without you." Well, Harold, you were right. I pulled up the remote admin terminal on my phone, not for North Star, but for Ironclad Holdings. The interface was simple, black background, green text. No fancy graphics, just raw data. The logs were scrolling by faster now. 14:15:00 handshake failed. 14:15:01 handshake failed. 14:15:02 connection refused, authentication token revoked. It wasn't that I had shut off the servers. I wasn't malicious. I simply stopped authenticated traffic. The servers were running fine. They were humming away in a climate-controlled data center 3 towns over, which I paid for. They just weren't talking to North Star anymore because North Star was no longer a paying tenant. It was like changing the locks on a rental house when the squatter finally leaves. I checked the North Star internal Slack again. It was a bloodbath. DevOps Steve, guys, why is the API returning a 403 forbidden on everything? Project MGR Sarah, clients are calling. The payment portal is down. Is this scheduled maintenance? DevOps Steve, I can't get into the server root. My keys aren't working. It's like the server doesn't exist. Sales Brad, I just lost a transaction mid-closing. What is happening? Then the message I was waiting for. CEO Claire, at everyone stop panicking. IT is fixing it. It's just a glitch from the transition. Michelle sabotaged a few codes on her way out. We will have it back up in 5 minutes. Sabotage, that was cute. She was already spinning the narrative. She was going to try and paint me as the disgruntled employee who cut the wires. She didn't realize that by accusing me of sabotage, she was admitting she had no control over her own product. I took a screenshot of her message. That would be useful later. My phone buzzed. It wasn't a Slack message this time. It was a call. Caller ID Harold Wells Mobile. I stared at the screen. Harold. He must have been on the 9th hole when his phone started blowing up. I debated answering. I really did. There was a part of me, the part that remembered the pizza in the garage, that wanted to pick up and explain it to him gently. But then I remembered the boardroom. I remembered the silence of the men I had worked with for 2 decades. I remembered Claire's laugh. I let it go to voicemail. I wasn't the bedrock anymore. I was the landslide. The bartender, Joe, wandered back over. You all right, darlin'? You look like you're watching a car wreck. I am, Joe, I said, sliding a 20 across the bar. But I'm not in the car. I'm the one who designed the intersection. I opened my email app. I had drafted a message to my lawyer, David, earlier that morning. David was a shark in a suit, a man who charged $800 an hour and was worth every penny. The subject line was, Activation of Clause 14. B. Ironclad Holdings vs. North Star Systems. I hit send. Legal war hadn't even started yet, but the tactical nuke had already been dropped. I ordered some jalapeno poppers. I figured I needed some sustenance. Watching an empire burn is hungry work. By 3:00 p.m., the 5-minute glitch had turned into a 45-minute catastrophe. The rusty anchor was starting to fill up with the early happy hour crowd, mostly blue-collar guys dusting off drywall or oil grease. But my attention was glued to the digital window I had into my old life. I still had access to the chaotic symphony of the hash engineering channel. Why? Because I was the one who set up the SSO, single sign-on permissions, and I had buried my own admin rights so deep in the kernel of the authentication server that God himself would need a search warrant to find them. Claire's team of cloud natives wouldn't find that backdoor for weeks. DevOps Steve. Okay. I've tried rebooting the gateway. Nothing. I've tried rerouting the DNS. Nothing. The IP addresses for the transaction nodes are just gone. It's like they fell off the face of the earth. Junior Dev Kyle, Steve, I just ran a trace route. It's stopping at the ISB level. The destination host isn't accepting traffic from our domain. CTO Interim Gary, the guy they hired last week, visionary from Silicon Valley who wears scarves in July, just posted, have we tried flushing the cache? I laughed out loud, startling a guy next to me eating wings. Flushing the cache. It was like trying to fix a decapitation with a band-aid. The problem wasn't code. The problem was hardware ownership. The servers that processed the payments, specifically the high-volume, secure clusters required by banking regulations, resided in a rack at a co-location facility in Dallas. That rack was leased to Ironclad Holdings. North Star Systems connected to it via a dedicated encrypted VPN tunnel. When I walked out, I didn't break the code. I just revoked the VPN certificate. The tunnel collapsed. North Star was currently shouting its transaction data into a void. Then came the first real casualty. Sales VP Karen, no relation to the meme, but acts like it Claire. The Bank of Annieville just called. Their customers are getting transaction declined on every swipe at the grocery store. They are threatening to pull the contract. That's a $4M account, do something. I took a bite of a jalapeno popper, spicy, just like the situation in the server room. I imagined the scene on the 40th floor. The panic, the frantic typing, the smell of nervous sweat battling against the HVAC system. Claire would be screaming by now. She wasn't used to things not working. In her world, if the Wi-Fi was slow, you yelled at the barista. But you can't yell at a server rack. It doesn't care about your dad's money. I decided to twist the knife a little. Not directly, I couldn't interact or I'd show my hand too early, but I could check the logs of the backup system I had insisted they build 3 years ago. Ah, yes, the backup system. One Claire had defunded last budget cycle because redundancy is just paying twice for the same service. I navigated to the backup logs. Last backup 8 months ago. Status, corrupted. Reason, storage limit exceeded. Subscription canceled by user, C. Wells. She had canceled the cloud storage subscription for the backups to save $500 a month, on a company generating $50 million a year. The sheer, staggering incompetence was almost poetic. It was grimecore poetry, written in binary. My phone rang again. This time it wasn't Harold, it was Gary, the scarf-wearing interim CTO. I watched it ring. Ring, Ring, I picked up, not to help but to gather intelligence. This is Michelle, I said, keeping my voice cool and professional like I was taking a reservation for dinner. Michelle, thank God, Gary sounded breathless. Look, there's been a misunderstanding. The transition seems to have snagged on some legacy protocols. We need the admin keys for the server cluster, just the root passwords. We can handle it from there. Gary, I said, I don't work for Northstar anymore. Giving you passwords would be a violation of the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. I can't access systems I'm not authorized for. Don't give me that legal crap, he snapped. The visionary facade was cracking. Claire is breathing down my neck. The system is down. Just text me the damn password and we'll call it even. Call it even? I asked. Gary, do you know where those servers are physically located? The cloud? He guessed. No, Gary, they are in a building in Dallas. A building I pay rent on, a rack I own. You're asking for the keys to my house. Wait, he paused. You own the hardware? I own the metal, the silicon, and the electricity running through it. Since my lease agreement with Northstar was terminated at 2:15 p.m. today, you are currently trespassing on my bandwidth. Jesus, he whispered. Does Claire know? She's about to find out, I said. Good luck, Gary. I hope your resume is up to date. I hung up. The first ripple had turned into a wave. The tech team now knew this wasn't a bug. It was a structural void. They were trying to drive a car that had no engine, and they had just realized the hood was welded shut. I ordered another bourbon. The sun was starting to dip lower in the Texas sky, casting long, orange shadows across the bar. It was the golden hour. Appropriate. I was about to watch their golden goose get cooked. You know the saying, bad news travels fast? In the age of Twitter, X, bad news travels at the speed of fiber optics. By 4:30 p.m., #Northstar Down was trending locally in Austin and Dallas. I scrolled through the feed on my phone. It was beautiful. At Angry Mom TX, my card just got declined at the pharmacy for my kids' asthma meds. The pharmacist said the processor is down. Thanks at Northstar says for almost killing my kid. #fail at CryptoBro99. Northstar Systems is rug pulling. Can't access my merchant dashboard. Is this another FTX? At DeVito Fan for Life. Ironically, this guy had a profile pic of Danny DeVito, just tried to pay my employees via Northstar. System dead. Guess we're paying an exposure this week. It wasn't just complaints. It was the digital dismantling of a brand's reputation in real time. And the best part? Claire's social media team, 2 unpaid interns and a brand evangelist named Tyler, were silent. They couldn't post because they couldn't log into their dashboard either. The social media scheduling tool was linked to the central authentication server. The one I owned. Oops. Back in the internal Slack, the panic had shifted from technical confusion to existential dread. HR Director Linda, everyone? I just tried to run the bi-weekly payroll batch. It failed. Error 503. Does anyone know if we can cut paper checks? Accounting Bob, paper checks? Linda, we have 400 employees spread across 3 states. Don't even have a check printer anymore. Claire threw it out last month to make room for the kombucha tap. The kombucha tap. I shook my head. That tap cost $5,000. The backup server subscription was $500. Priorities. Then came the extra pickles moment, the detail that exposed the rot. A notification popped up in the #general channel, which was usually reserved for birthday announcements and lost and found. Because the payment processor was failing, the automated error logs were spitting out raw transaction data into the chat as a default failsafe. I had set that up years ago to debug specific errors, but I never turned it off. System error, failed transaction. Vendor, Elite Private Jet Charters. Amount, $45,000. Memo, CEO Retreat Cabo. Status, declined insufficient infrastructure. The chat froze. The employees, who had been told last week that there was no money for cost of living raises, were now staring at a declined $45K charge for a CEO retreat to Cabo. Senior Dev Mike, Cabo? I thought she was at a strategic partner summit in Houston. Marketing Jen, we laid off 3 designers yesterday to streamline costs. Dev Ops Steve, I'm done. I'm literally watching my rent money vanish while she tries to fly to Cabo. Does anyone have Michelle's number? She's the only one who actually did anything around here. I sipped my drink. The mutiny wasn't being led by a charismatic revolutionary. It was being led by a failed jet charter payment. It was grime-core reality. The dirty laundry wasn't just aired. It was being live-streamed to the people whose livelihoods were being laundered. Suddenly, my access to Slack cut out. Connection lost. They had finally found the kill switch for my account. It took them 3 hours. Frankly, I was disappointed. I expected better from Gary, but the damage was done. The screenshots were already circulating. I saw a screenshot of the Cabo transaction pop up on Twitter 5 minutes later, posted by an anonymous account named Northstar Exile. Claire wasn't just fighting a tech failure anymore. She was fighting a class war within her own building. I signaled for the check. The first phase was complete. The technical infrastructure was dead. Social capital was incinerated. Now it was time for the money men to get involved. I walked out of the bar into the cooling evening air. The Texas sunset was a bruise of purple and red across the horizon. I had a meeting to prepare for, not a scheduled one, but one I knew was coming. My phone buzzed, a text message. From David, lawyer, they just called. Their general counsel is threatening a temporary restraining order and an injunction. I told them to read clause 14. B again, they hung up. I think they're crying. I typed back, let them cry, it hydrates the skin. I got into my truck. The engine roared to life, a deep, reliable sound. Unlike North Star, my truck worked because I took care of it. I maintained it. I respected it. Claire treated her company like a rental car she bought insurance for. She was about to find out that acts of God don't cover acts of Michelle. Harold Wells was a man who believed in handshake deals and the sanctity of a golf handicap. He was currently in Naples, Florida, wearing linen pants that cost more than my mortgage payment, likely nursing a scotch and staring at the Gulf of Mexico. I could picture him perfectly. He'd be holding his phone like it was a grenade that had just had the pin pulled. And it had. The first voicemail appeared on my phone at 5:15 p.m. I didn't listen to it yet. I drove home, a nice ranch-style place on 3 acres outside the city limits. I had bought it with the bonuses Harold gave me back when he still ran the show. It was quiet here. No sirens, no corporate buzzwords, just crickets and the distant hum of the highway. I poured myself a glass of iced tea. I was done with the bourbon for now. I needed a clear head for the end game and sat on my back porch. I finally pressed play on the voicemail. Michelle, it's Harold. Look, I'm hearing some disturbing things from the board. Claire says you sabotaged the system, says you planted a virus. I told her that didn't sound like you, but the bank just called me, Michelle. The bank. They say our merchant processors are offline. Call me back. We need to fix this. His voice was shaky. It lacked the booming confidence of the man who used to sell vaporware to venture capitalists. He sounded old. I didn't call back. 10 minutes later, another voicemail. Michelle, pick up the damn phone. Gary says you own the servers? What the hell is he talking about? We own the company. How can you own the servers? I don't remember signing that. This is blackmail, isn't it? Whatever you want, we can discuss it. Just turn it back on. Claire is in over her head. I know that. Just help me out here for old time's sake. For old time's sake. The phrase hung in the humid air. I remembered old times. I remembered when the payroll system crashed in 2009, and I paid the engineers out of my own savings account so they wouldn't walk, and Harold promised to pay me back with interest. He did, eventually, but he forgot the interest. I remembered when his first wife left him, and I ran the company for 3 months while he went on a bender in Vegas. I remembered teaching Claire how to use Excel when she was an intern, and her rolling her eyes at me every time I corrected her formulas. Old times were expensive, and the bill was past due. I pulled out the file I kept in my home office. The original partnership agreement, the addendums, the LLC formation documents for Ironclad Holdings. There it was, in black and white, Harold's signature scrawled in blue ink at the bottom of the master service agreement. He hadn't read it. He had been too busy popping champagne to celebrate the funding round. He trusted me to handle the boring technical stuff. He trusted me to be his safety net. But he forgot that a safety net only works if you don't cut the ropes. My phone rang again. Harold, this time I answered. Hello, Harold. Michelle? He sounded relieved, but also angry. What the hell is going on? Why is my company offline? Your company isn't offline, Harold, I said calmly. Your software is working perfectly. It's just that your company has been evicted. Evicted? What are you talking about? The servers, the hardware, the infrastructure. It belongs to Ironclad Holdings. You know this. You signed the lease. I signed a lot of things, he shouted. I didn't sign away my company. No, you signed a lease that was contingent on my employment, I explained, as if speaking to a child. Claire fired me today. At 2:00 p.m., she called me legacy baggage. She said I was obsolete, so I took my baggage and left. My baggage just happened to be the servers. She fired you? Harold's voice dropped. She didn't tell me that. She said you quit in a huff. She lied, Harold. Just like she lied about the Cabo trip being a partner summit. Silence on the line, heavy breathing silence. Michelle, he said, his voice trembling. Fix it, please. I'll fire her. I'll fire Gary. I'll give you a raise, double your salary. Just turn the key back on. I can't do that, Harold. Why not? Is it the money? I'll wire you $1 million right now. Personal funds. It's not about the money, I said, watching a hawk circle the field behind my house. It's about the liability. You see, if I turn the servers back on now without a valid contract, I'm accepting liability for a system I don't manage. I'm not an employee anymore. I'm an outside vendor. And frankly, North Star Systems is a high-risk client. You have unstable leadership, a compromised cash flow, and a reputation that is currently burning down on Twitter. Ironclad Holdings doesn't do business with unstable partners. You're killing us, he whispered. No, Harold, I said softly. I'm just the coroner. Claire killed it. I'm just signing the death certificate. I hung up. I knew that was cruel. But cruelty is just efficiency without the emotional buffer. Harold had let his daughter treat the company like a toy. He had let her treat me like furniture. He needed to learn that you can't inherit respect and you can't buy loyalty once you've sold it down the river. I went back inside. I had a feeling the lawyers would be trying again soon. And unlike Harold, they wouldn't be appealing to emotion. They'd be coming with threats. Good thing I speak fluent threat. At 7:00 p.m., the cease and desist letter arrived via email. It was marked urgent in all caps, which is lawyer speak for we are panicking but trying to look scary. I forwarded it to David, my attorney. David is the kind of lawyer who wears cowboy boots to court and quotes the Bible while eviscerating the opposition. He called me 3 minutes later. Michelle, he chuckled. This is cute. They're citing the duty of loyalty and tortious interference. They're trying to argue that by enforcing your own contract, you're sabotaging their business. What's our play, David? I asked, putting my feet up on the coffee table. Well, he said, the sound of papers shuffling in the background. I'm going to send them a response attaching the 2018 asset allocation audit, the one where they explicitly declined to purchase the servers from you because they wanted to keep the depreciation off their books. Remember that? I remember, I smiled. Harold wanted his EBITDA to look better for the bank loan. Exactly. Can't claim ownership of something they legally refused to buy to save on taxes. It's called estoppel, and it's going to hit them like a freight train. The conference call happened 30 minutes later. It was me, David, North Star's general counsel, a guy named Robert who sounded like he was sweating through his phone, and Claire. This is extortion. Claire shrieked as soon as the line connected. She's holding our data hostage. Miss Wells, David's voice was like molasses. Please control yourself or we will terminate this call. My client is not holding anything hostage. Your data is sitting safely on drives that belong to my client. You are welcome to come and retrieve your data. We can provide you with the raw hard drives. Of course, you'll need your own servers to read them since you don't own any. We need the service restored immediately. Robert, the GC, interjected. We are losing thousands of dollars a minute. We'll sue you for damages. On what grounds? David asked. Clause 14B is clear. Lease terminates upon employment termination. You fired her. You terminated the lease. You evicted yourselves. We didn't know about the lease. Claire yelled. Ignorance of your own corporate structure is not a legal defense, darling, David drawled. In fact, it's a breach of fiduciary duty to your shareholders. You might want to worry less about suing Michelle and more about the class action lawsuit your investors are going to file when they find out you fired the woman who owned the power cord. Silence. Beautiful, heavy silence. What do you want? Robert asked, his voice defeated. We can draft a consulting agreement. Temporary reinstatement. Name your price. I leaned into the speakerphone. I don't want a job, Robert. I don't want money. I want you to understand something. You called me obsolete. You said I was baggage. Well, I'm unpacking my baggage elsewhere. We can get an injunction, Claire threatened, her voice cracking. I know judges. In Texas, David laughed. Miss Wells, you're in a contract dispute over hardware ownership with a clear paper trail. No judge in this state is going to force a private business owner to provide services to a client who isn't paying and who just fired them. You're dead in the water. We're willing to buy the servers. Robert said quickly, right now, we'll wire the funds. Fair market value plus 20%. Not for sale, I said. Everything is for sale, Robert pressed. No, I corrected. Commodities are for sale, leverage is not, and right now I have all the leverage. Those servers are custom configured. They run proprietary encryption scripts that I wrote. Even if I sold you the boxes, you wouldn't know how to turn them on without me. And I am not for hire. Ruining my company? Claire sobbed. The anger was gone, replaced by pure spoiled child despair. My dad is going to kill me. He might, I agreed, but at least you'll have plenty of time to work on your resume. I hear legacy baggage handler is a growing field. I hung up the phone. David texted me a moment later. That was the most fun I've had with my pants on in years. I laughed, but the laugh caught in my throat. It was a victory, yes, but it was also a funeral. I had spent 20 years building that company. I had loved it. I had bled for it. And now I had to be the one to put a bullet in its head because the new owners were letting it suffer. It wasn't malice, it was mercy. I went to my computer and opened up a new window, GoDaddy.com. I typed in a new domain name, South Star Tech.com available. I clicked buy. The king is dead, long live the queen. By the next morning, North Star Systems wasn't a company. It was a crime scene. The transaction freeze had now lasted 18 hours. The damage was catastrophic. Major clients, banks, hospital networks, retail chains had already initiated emergency protocol breaches. They were moving their volume to competitors. Stripe and Square were probably having a record day, feasting on the carcass of North Star's market share. My phone was buzzing nonstop, but not from management. It was the staff. DevOps Steve, hey Michelle. Gary just resigned. He literally walked out, threw his scarf in the trash can, and left. Claire is locked in her office. Project MGR Sarah, they're saying we might not get paid on Friday. Is that true? Sales Brad, I just got off the phone with Amazon. They pulled the partnership. It's over, isn't it? I replied to them one by one. Steve, send me your resume. I'm starting something new. Sarah, don't worry about payroll. If they default, you have priority claim. Also, send me your resume. Brad, yeah, it's over. But you're a good salesman. You sold ice to Eskimos. Send me your resume. I was poaching them. Shamelessly. Openly. Why wouldn't I? They were good people working for a bad captain. I was just sending out the lifeboats. At 10 o'clock a.m., the news broke on TechCrunch. Headline, North Star Systems goes dark. CEO disruption leads to infrastructure collapse. The article quoted an anonymous source, definitely Gary, saying that the CEO had fired the owner of the servers without realizing she didn't own the servers. The internet ate it up. It was the perfect storm of corporate schadenfreude. Memes of Claire, taken from her influencer CEO Instagram page, were being captioned with 404 CEO not found and gaslight, gatekeep, glitch. I watched from my home office as I set up the framework for South Star Tech. It wasn't hard. I already had the hardware ironclad holdings. I had the capital, my savings, plus the settlements that were inevitably coming. And now I had the talent pipeline. I received an email from the biggest client Northstar had, a national logistics firm called Trans Global. Their CTO, a guy named Marcus who I had known for years, sent a direct message. Subject, are you operational? Body, Michelle, we know what happened. We know who holds the keys. If you spin up a new instance under a new entity, we will move our entire volume to you. We trust the architect, not the logo. Let us know. That was the nail in the coffin. Northstar wasn't losing clients to competitors. They were losing them to me, and I hadn't even printed business cards yet. I called Marcus back. Give me 48 hours to scrub the servers and reimage them with a new encryption key. I'll have you processing by Monday. Done, Marcus said. We're serving Northstar with a breach of contract notice today. I hung up and looked at the whiteboard in my office. I drew a line down the middle. On the left, legacy baggage. On the right, future revenue. I started moving names from the left to the right. The office in downtown was probably in chaos. I imagined the empty cubicles, the ringing phones echoing in the void, the smell of fear and stale coffee. Claire was likely trying to spin this as a strategic pause, but nobody buys a pause when money is involved. Money likes speed. Money likes certainty. I was certainty. Claire was chaos. The irony was, if she had just treated me with a shred of respect, if she had just given me a gold watch and a consulting retainer, I would have handed over the keys. I would have trained her team. I would have retired to my porch and drank iced tea. But she had to be the alpha. She had to mark her territory. Well, she marked it all right. She marked it with gasoline and handed me the match. My driveway alarm chimed. Someone was at the gate. I checked the security camera feed. It was a black Mercedes. Harold's car. He looked terrible. He was wearing a rumpled polo shirt and he looked like he hadn't slept in a week, even though it had only been 24 hours. I buzzed the gate open. It was time for the final act. Harold walked up the flagstone path to my front door like a man walking to the gallows. I met him on the porch. I didn't invite him inside. My house was my sanctuary. He didn't belong there anymore. Michelle, he croaked. His eyes were red-rimmed. I flew back. Private charter. Cost me a fortune. Hello, Harold, I said, leaning against the doorframe. You look tired. Tired? He let out a harsh, barking laugh. I'm ruined. The stock dropped 60% this morning. The board is calling for my head. Claire. Claire is locked in her office crying. She does that when she doesn't get her way, I noted dryly. She's a child, Michelle, you know that. She's incompetent, I know that now. He took a step closer, his hands pleading. But you, your family, we built this, you and me, in the garage. Remember the pizza? Remember the code sprints? I remember. I said, I also remember you cashing out $20 million last year while I got an Employee of the Month plaque. I'll make it right, he insisted. Come back, name your title. CEO. You want to be CEO? It's yours. I'll fire Claire. I'll fire the whole board. Just come back and turn the servers on. I looked at this man. This man I had once admired. This man I had viewed as a mentor. I realized I didn't hate him. I just pitied him. He thought everything could be fixed with a deal. He didn't understand that trust isn't a renewable resource. Once it's gone, it's gone. Harold, I said softly, I can't come back. Why not pride? Don't let pride kill $1 billion company, Michelle. It's not pride, I shook my head. It's physics. The structure is gone. The clients have left. Trans Global signed with a new provider 10 minutes ago. His face went pale. Who? Who did they sign with? Me, I said. South Star Tech. Harold stared at me. His mouth opened, then closed. He looked like he had been punched in the gut. You started a competitor? I didn't start a competitor, Harold. I just kept doing my job. I provide infrastructure to clients who need stability. Northstar couldn't provide stability, so the market corrected itself. You stole my clients, he accused, a flash of the old anger returning. I didn't steal anything, they called me. They called me because they know I own the engine. They know that when I say uptime, I mean it. They know that when you say innovation, you mean nepotism. He slumped against the porch railing. The fight drained out of him. He looked out at the oak trees in my yard. I should have never given it to her, he whispered. I knew she wasn't ready, but she's my daughter. What was I supposed to do? You were supposed to protect the company, I said. You were supposed to protect the people who worked for you. You were supposed to protect me. He looked at me, tears gathering in his eyes. I'm sorry, Michelle. I know you are Harold. I believe you. I stood up straight. But apologies don't reboot servers. What happens now? He asked, sounding like a lost child. Now, I shrugged. Northstar files for Chapter 11. You liquidate the assets, the brand, the IP, the furniture. My lawyers will be in touch about the unpaid lease invoices. We'll be first in line as creditors. And you? I'm going to work, I said. I have a new company to run, and I have a lot of resumes to review. Your old staff needs jobs. Harold nodded slowly. He understood it was over. The legacy he thought he was leaving to his daughter was gone. He had traded a kingdom for a family photo op, and now he had neither. He turned and walked back to his car. It looked smaller than I remembered. I watched him drive away. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel giddy. I felt clean. It was like scrubbing a dirty floor. The grime was gone. The surface was raw, but it was ready for something new. I went back inside and poured myself one last bourbon, to old times and to being obsolete, 3 months later. The carcass of North Star Systems is still being picked over by the vultures in bankruptcy court. Claire was removed by the board 2 days after the collapse. Rumor has it she's back in Bali, healing her trauma and launching a podcast about toxic workplaces. The irony is thick enough to choke a horse. Harold had a minor stroke. He's recovering, but he's out of the game. He spends his days on the porch in Florida, probably wondering where it all went wrong. I sent him a card. I didn't sign it. South Star Tech is booming. We're operating out of a converted warehouse in East Austin. No marble tables, no kombucha taps, just rows of desks, humming servers, and the smell of coffee that actually works. I hired back 80% of the North Star engineering team. Steve is my VP of engineering. Sarah runs operations. They're making 20% more than they did under Claire, and they have equity. Real equity. Not phantom stock options that vest in a decade. We bought the North Star client list for pennies on the dollar during the liquidation auction. It was satisfying to sign that check. I basically bought my own life's work back for the price of a used Camry. I'm not the chief infrastructure architect anymore. I'm the owner, the CEO, the janitor if I need to be. I still drive my truck. I still drink bourbon. And I still keep that original contract framed on my wall. It's a reminder. People like Claire think power comes from a title. They think it comes from sitting at the head of the table. They don't understand that power is plumbing. It's the stuff you don't see. It's the wires in the wall. It's the sewer lines. It's the servers in the cold, dark room. As long as the shit flows and the lights turn on, nobody cares about you. But the second you turn the valve, the second you pull the plug, you realize who really runs the world. It's not the people in the suits. It's the people with the keys. I was sitting in my new office, listening to the hum of the racks, when my phone buzzed. A LinkedIn notification. Claire Wells has viewed your profile. I smiled. I didn't view hers back. I blocked her. Then I put on my headphones, turned up some Danny DeVito Asmer, Don't Judge, It Centers Me, and went back to work. They called me obsolete. I call myself the upgrade. TLDR, CEO fired me thinking I was useless. Didn't realize I personally owned the servers running the company. I turned them off. Company collapsed. I started a new one with their clients and staff. Don't mess with the plumber. Real power doesn't need to shout. It operates with quiet, undeniable precision. Michelle showed them exactly what obsolete truly looked like, making it clear that true value isn't always announced from a podium. Its absence, however, leaves an undeniable void. Appreciate you all for sticking through this one. See you in the next story. I knew the exact moment I became furniture. It wasn't when they moved my desk next to the server closet to make room for a ping pong table, and it wasn't when the new director of Vibe asked me if I was the IT support for the printer. It was at the Series C celebration dinner. They were popping Dom Perignon like it was tap water, toasting to OmniStream's visionary genius, while the visionary genius, Gavin, stood on a table, soaking wet with champagne, screaming about how he changed the world. I was sitting at the far end of the table, nursing a lukewarm seltzer, watching them celebrate a machine they didn't know how to turn on. See, people think startups are built on dreams and caffeine. They aren't. They're built on paperwork that nobody reads because they're too busy measuring the size of their own dicks in the reflection of a skyscraper. 8 years ago, before the glass offices and the Patagonia vests, it was just me and a laptop in a basement that smelled like wet drywall and ambition. I wrote the core, the predictive commerce engine that currently generates 90% of this company's revenue. Gavin provided the pizza and the hype. I provided the logic. Quick side note before I dismantle these people. If you enjoy stories about the quiet person in the back of the room holding the nuclear launch codes, go ahead and hit subscribe button. Maybe drop a like, it keeps the algorithm happy and helps me pay for the good scotch I'm drinking while I type this. Anyway, back to the crime scene. Back then, we were incorporating. Gavin was manic, signing papers without looking, eyes already on the imaginary billions. I was different. I was a postdoc with trust issues and a student loan debt that looked like a phone number. I didn't want equity that could be diluted, I wanted control. So, in the stack of incorporation documents, right between the bylaws and the standard non-competes, I slipped in a single, boring-looking sheet. It was an intellectual property lease agreement. It stated in very plain English that I, Natalie Vance, retained full ownership of the predictive logic source code, V1.0 and all derivatives, and was leasing it to OmniStream Inc. for the generous sum of $1.00 per year. Renewable annually. Terminable by the licensor, me, with 30 days' notice if the lease fee wasn't paid or if the contract wasn't formally renewed. Gavin signed it. He signed it with a flourish, using a Montblanc pen he couldn't afford while talking about disrupting the paradigm. He didn't read it, nobody read it. For 8 years, I paid myself that $1 out of petty cash, filed the receipt, and renewed the lease unilaterally. I was the ghost in the machine. I kept the engine running, patched the holes, and scaled the architecture while Gavin went on podcasts and talked about synergy. But the atmosphere shifted about 6 months ago. The company got too big for its breeches, as my grandmother would say, or operationally mature, as the VCs say. The bro culture went from charmingly chaotic to toxic and corporate. I stopped being the founding engineer and started becoming a liability. I wasn't cool. I didn't play golf. I didn't want to microdose psilocybin at corporate retreats in Joshua Tree. I just wanted to code. I sat there at that Series C dinner, watching Gavin high-five the new VP of sales, a guy who looked like he was manufactured in a lab that specializes in teeth whitening and overconfidence, and I felt a cold, calm settle over me. They looked at me and saw a middle-aged woman in a cardigan who helped out in the early days. They didn't realize they were looking at their landlord, and the rent was about to go up. The disconnect was almost funny. They were celebrating the fruit, unaware that I owned the tree, the soil, and the water rights. I went back to the office late that night, not to work, but to check the physical file cabinet. There it was, yellowing slightly, the original lease, Gavin's jagged signature in blue ink. I made a digital copy. Then I made a physical copy. Then I went home, poured a glass of wine, and waited. I knew the storm was coming. I just didn't expect it to arrive wearing a pair of all birds and a fake smile named Marcus. Enter Marcus. He was the new CTO, brought in by the board because the company needed executive polish. Marcus was the kind of guy who used words like ideate, North Star, and scalable verbosity in casual conversation. He had an MBA from somewhere expensive and a GitHub profile that looked like a barren wasteland. He walked into the engineering department on his first day, clapped his hands, and announced, "We're going to pivot to a microservices architecture driven by AI-native frameworks." I literally felt my migraines start behind my left eye. The current architecture was AI-native. I wrote it. It was already microservices. I designed it. Guys like Marcus don't actually look at the code, they look at the buzzwords. He called me into his office on Tuesday. It was one of those glass fishbowls where everyone can see you getting fired. He didn't offer me a seat. He sat on the edge of his desk, swinging a leg, trying to look casual and authoritative at the same time. "Natalie, hey, great work on the legacy stuff," he said. Legacy stuff. The code was running live transactions at 50 milliseconds latency. It wasn't legacy, it was the nervous system of the company. "Listen, we're bringing in a new team to handle the Omni 2.0 build. We need fresh eyes, younger energy, you know how it is." "I wrote the core, Marcus," I said, keeping my voice flat. "If you change the data ingestion pipeline, you'll break the predictive models. The client historicals won't map." He waved a hand dismissively, like he was swatting away a fly. "That's why we need you to transition to an advisory role. We want you to document everything. Write down the tribal knowledge. Hand over the keys to the castle so the new rock stars can drive. We're thinking head of legacy maintenance. It's a vital role. Head of legacy maintenance." It was corporate speak for janitor. He wanted me to write the manual for my own replacement, then sit in a corner and fix bugs while he took credit for modernizing the stack. I looked at him. I looked at his perfectly coiffed hair and his expensive watch that probably cost more than my first car. He thought he was demoting me. He thought he was putting the old horse out to pasture. He had no idea he was talking to the owner of the pasture. "I understand," I said. "You want full documentation of the IP and a handover of all administrative access." "Exactly," he beamed, thinking I was rolling over. "Team player. Love it. Need a few weeks to organize the files," I lied. "There's a lot of historical context." "Take your time," he said, checking his phone. "Just make sure the new guys have root access by Friday." I walked out of that office, and for the first time in years, I felt alive. Not happy alive. It's the feeling you get when you're playing poker and you look down to see four aces, and the guy across from you just shoved his house keys into the pot. I went back to my desk and started documenting. But I wasn't writing tutorials, I was auditing. I pulled the logs for the last 8 years. I downloaded the commit histories. I found every single instance where Gavin, Marcus, or the previous CTOs had claimed my code was proprietary company technology in emails to investors. I built a dossier. Then I went to the legal filing cabinet again. I checked the dates. The annual lease renewal was due on October 1st. It was currently October 15th. They had missed the payment. They had missed the renewal window. Technically, as of 2 weeks ago, OmniStream Inc. was operating on stolen property. I didn't say a word. I just kept typing, smiling at the juniors who looked at me with pity. "Oh, look at poor Natalie, she's washing out." I wasn't washing out. I was waiting for the tide to turn so I could drown them. The thing about incompetence is that it leaves a trail. Smart people cover their tracks. Idiots just assume no one is looking. Marcus was an idiot. While I was supposedly documenting legacy systems, I was actually deep diving into the company's sales contracts. I had admin access to everything. Nobody had thought to revoke it yet because, again, I was just furniture. I found a folder marked Project Titan. It was a contract with the largest retail conglomerate in North America. We're talking a $200 million deal. The pilot program was set to launch in 3 weeks. I read the technical specs promised to the client: proprietary predictive behavioral modeling, real-time inventory adaptation, customized user intent algorithms. They were selling my code, not just using it. They were white labeling it and selling it as a standalone product to a third party. I checked the IP clauses in the client contract. OmniStream warranted that it had full and exclusive ownership of all underlying technology. That was a lie. A multi-million-dollar lie. If I pulled the license, OmniStream wouldn't just lose the deal. They would be in breach of contract for fraud. They would be sued into a crater in the ground. I needed to be sure. I spent the weekend running diffs, comparisons between the code I wrote in my basement 8 years ago and the code currently running on the Titan servers. It was a 98% match. They hadn't even refactored the variable names. I found comments I'd written in 2015, jokes about my cat, reminders to buy milk, still embedded in the deep logic of the neural net. They hadn't rewritten anything. Marcus's new architecture was just a fancy API wrapper slapped on top of my engine. It was like putting a spoiler on a Honda Civic and selling it as a Ferrari. I called a lawyer I knew from grad school, a shark named Alina who specialized in IP litigation. We met at a dive bar in Somerville, far away from the innovation district. I slid the folder across the sticky table. Tell me I'm crazy, I said. Alina read the lease. She read the Titan contract. She read the missed renewal notice. She started laughing. It was a terrifying sound. Natalie, she said, wiping tears from her eyes, this isn't a lawsuit. This is an execution. You own the foundation of a unicorn, and they just forgot to pay the rent. What's the play? I asked. Silence, she said. Let them dig the hole deeper. Let them launch the pilot. Let them take the investor money. The more they rely on your IP, the more leverage you have. You need to officially record the assignment in your name just to be safe, but keep it quiet. When the time comes, we don't send a letter, we send a bomb. I went back to work on Monday with a spring in my step. Marcus stopped by my desk. How's that documentation coming, Nat? We really need to sunset your access soon. Almost done, I chirped, just making sure every line of code is properly attributed. Wouldn't want any confusion later. Great, he said. Distracted? By the way, can you fix the latency on the Titan server? It's lagging. I smiled. I'd love to, Marcus, but that sounds like a job for the new architecture. He scowled and walked away. I put my headphones on and listened to a podcast about heavy metal history. The Titan server wasn't lagging because of code. It was lagging because I had throttled the processing power by 5%. Just a little tug on the leash. A reminder that the dog doesn't walk the master. The betrayal wasn't just financial. It was existential. Wednesday afternoon, I was in the break room making a coffee. The espresso machine was broken, of course, because the Office Vibe manager didn't know how to descale it when Jason walked in. Jason was a junior dev, a sweet kid fresh out of MIT who still had that look of hope in his eyes. It was one of the few people who actually asked me questions about the codebase instead of just copying and pasting from Stack Overflow. Hey, Natalie, he said, looking around nervously to make sure we were alone. Can I ask you something weird? Shoot, I said, stirring powdered creamer into my sludge. In the all-hands engineering meeting this morning, Marcus showed us the core prediction module. He said he wrote the base logic during a hackathon last weekend. But I saw the timestamps and the syntax style. It looks exactly like your old commits. My blood ran cold, then it boiled. Marcus wasn't just pushing me out, he was plagiarizing me in real time. He was claiming authorship of my life's work to a room full of 20-year-olds who didn't know any better. He said that? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. Yeah. He said he refactored the clumsy legacy logic into a streamlined heuristic. But I looked at the code. Natalie, he just renamed the variables. He changed user velocity to customer journey speed and called it a day. Clumsy legacy logic, I repeated. That clumsy logic was currently processing $3 million of transactions an hour. I just thought you should know, Jason said, grabbing a la croix. It didn't sit right with me. Thanks, Jason, I said. Keep your head down. Don't say anything to him. Are you going to do something? I'm handling it. I went back to my desk. That was the final nail. It wasn't enough to just get paid anymore. I wanted them humiliated. I wanted Marcus to stand in front of that whiteboard and explain why his streamlined heuristic had suddenly evaporated. I messaged Alina. They're claiming authorship internally. Fraud is now systemic. She replied instantly, good. We have the investor diligence request coming up. The Series D funding round opens next week. They have to disclose all IP ownership. This was the trap. The Series D investors were Goldman Sachs types, suits who didn't care about vibes but cared very deeply about liability. They would send a questionnaire asking, does the company own 100% of the IP? If Gavin and Marcus answered yes, they were committing securities fraud. If they answered no, they lost the funding. They would answer yes. I knew they would. They were arrogant. They thought I was a nobody. They thought the paper I signed 8 years ago was just trash. I spent the rest of the week cleaning up my files. I wasn't cleaning. I was removing every single comment that explained how the code worked. I stripped the documentation. I obfuscated the variable names in my local versions. I was turning the crystal clear engine into a black box that only I had the key to unlock. If they wanted to drive the car, they better hope nothing breaks, because I was about to cut the brake lines. The invite for the board meeting appeared on the shared calendar, then immediately disappeared. They had hidden it. Strategic Review and Series Definalization Board only. They were going to close the funding round, secure the $50 million, and then fire me. That was the play. They probably had the severance package drafted already, 2 weeks' pay and a non-disparagement agreement. I didn't wait for an invite. As a founding shareholder, even though my equity had been diluted to fractions, I had a statutory right to attend annual meetings, but this was a special session. However, my lease agreement had a clause. The licensor reserves the right to audit usage and compliance at any time upon reasonable notice. I printed the notice. I walked over to Gavin's executive assistant, a terrified girl named Brittany who spent 90% of her day returning Gavin's Amazon packages. Brittany, please add me to the agenda for the Tuesday board meeting, I said, handing her a hard copy of the request. She looked pale. Oh, Natalie, I think that's executives only. Gavin was pretty specific. It's an IP compliance audit, I said, using the magic words. If I'm not on the agenda, Series D diligence fails automatically because of outstanding legal queries. That scared her. She didn't know what it meant, but it sounded expensive. She added me. Gavin stormed over to my desk 10 minutes later. He smelled like stress and expensive cologne. Natalie, what is this? We're trying to close a deal here. We don't need the engineering team cluttering up the boardroom. It's just a formality, Gavin, I said, not looking up from my monitor. I need to clarify the IP assignment status for the investors. You know how sticky these lawyers get about the founding code stuff. Better to have me there to nod and say yes, it's all yours so you get the check, right? He paused. He was greedy and his greed made him stupid. He thought I was offering to help him lie. He thought I was finally falling in line to secure his money. Fine, he snapped. 5 minutes. You come in, you confirm the tech stack is stable and proprietary. And then you leave, no technical details, just the broad strokes. Broad strokes, I agreed, got it. The weekend passed in a blur. I didn't sleep. I prepared a slide deck. It was 3 slides long. Slide 1, the lease agreement 2015. Slide 2, the missed payment/non-renewal notice 2023. Slide 3, the Titan contract usage violation fees. Alina calculated the damages based on the unauthorized usage for the Titan pilot and the white labeling of the IP, plus the statutory damages for copyright infringement. The number was bigger than the Series D investment. I ironed my best blazer. I drank a kale smoothie which tasted like lawn clippings, but I needed the vitamins. I felt like a gladiator walking into the Colosseum, except my sword was a PDF and my shield was a thumb drive. The boardroom had a view of the Charles River. The table was mahogany, long enough to land a plane on. Around it sat the board of directors, Gavin Marcus, 2 VC partners from Sand Hill Road who were checking their emails, and a corporate attorney named Teffin with a PH who looked bored. When I walked in, nobody stood up. Gavin gestured vaguely to a chair in the corner away from the table. This is Natalie, our legacy engineer. She's just here to sign off on the IP diligence. One of the VCs, a guy in a fleece vest, looked at me over his glasses. So you built the original stack? I did, I said, remaining standing. I walked to the head of the table right next to Gavin. Great, the VC said, and we own all that, right? Standard assignment of inventions? Gavin nodded vigorously. 100% ironclad. Actually, I said, my voice cutting through the air conditioning hum. That's not accurate. The room went silent. The kind of silence you hear right before a car crash. Excuse me? Gavin laughed nervously. Natalie, don't confuse them with technicalities. It's not a technicality, Gavin, it's a lease. I plugged my laptop into the HDMI cable. The screen flickered to life. Slide 1, Intellectual Property Lease Agreement. Lesser, Natalie Vance. Lessee, Omnistream Inc. Status, expired. What the hell is this? Marcus stood up. This is a joke. 8 years ago, I said, dressing the VCs, ignoring Gavin completely. I retained ownership of the algorithm. OmniStream has been leasing it from me for $1 a year. It was a standard protect your ass maneuver. Gavin signed it. I clicked to the next slide. A blown-up image of Gavin's signature. We have an assignment of inventions clause in your employment contract. Stephen, the lawyer, barked, finally looking awake. Dated after incorporation, I corrected. This lease predates my employment contract. The IP was created prior to the entity's formation. It is excluded property, licensed back to the company. Check your due diligence file, Stephen. It's in there, you just didn't read it. Stephen started frantically typing on his laptop. His face went from bored to beet red in about 6 seconds. He looked at Gavin. Is this? Did you sign this? I sign 1,000 things. Gavin sputtered. It doesn't matter. It's our code. She works for us. I worked for you, I said. But the lease expired on October 1st. You failed to renew. You also failed to pay the $1 fee. Per the contract terms, the license has terminated. All usage of the predictive engine as of 14 days ago is unauthorized. I clicked to the final slide. Unauthorized usage. Project Titan. Estimated damages, $150,000 per violation. You are currently deploying unlicensed software to your largest client, I said, leaning on the table. You are selling property you do not own. If I make one phone call to the Titan legal team, this contract and this company evaporates. Gavin looked like he was having a stroke. Marcus looked like he was about to cry. The VCs just looked at me with a sudden, terrifying respect. "What do you want?" the VC in the fleece vest asked quietly. "You built this company?" Gavin screamed, slamming his hand on the table. "You're just a coder. You're a mechanic. You don't understand business." "I understand that you're squatting in my house," I replied calmly. "And I'm changing the locks." "We'll sue you," Marcus squeaked. "We'll bury you in legal fees." "With what money?" I asked. "The Series D isn't closed. And if these gentlemen," I nodded at the VCs, "walk out that door, you can't even make payroll next week." And they will walk out. Because no one invests in a software company that doesn't own its software. The VC raised a hand, silencing Marcus. He looked at Stephen, the lawyer. "Is she right?" Stephen loosened his tie. He looked like a man who was visualizing his own malpractice insurance premiums. "If the lease is valid, and it looks valid, and if it expired, yes, she owns the core IP. Without a new license, we are dead in the water." The room temperature dropped 10 degrees. VCs turned their cold, reptilian eyes toward Gavin. They didn't care about his vision anymore. He was a liability. "Natalie," the VC said, his voice smooth as silk. "Let's all take a breath. Obviously, there has been an oversight. We value your contribution. We can fix this. A retroactive renewal? A lump sum bonus we can offer you? I don't know, $50,000 and some stock options to sign a full assignment transfer today." I laughed. It was a genuine belly laugh. 50,000? You're raising 50 million on a valuation of 400 million, and you're offering me the price of a used Camry? "What is your number?" Gavin hissed. "I don't want a number," I said, "and I don't want to work here anymore. I don't want to report to Marcus, who thinks refactoring means renaming my variables." I slid a new document across the table. Alina had drafted it that morning. "This is a licensing agreement. It structures a new entity, Vance Logic LLC, which I own 100%. OmniStream will pay a licensing fee of 15% of all gross revenue derived from the predictive engine. That includes the Titan deal. And the license is revocable if any attempt is made to reverse engineer the code." 15% of gross? Gavin's eyes bulged. "That wipes out our margin. That kills the profitability." "Then write your own code," I said. "Have Marcus do it. He's a rock star, right? Give him a keyboard. I'll turn off my engine and he can build a new one by tomorrow morning before the Titan pilot launches." I looked at Marcus. He shrank into his chair. He knew he couldn't code Hello World without a tutorial, let alone a predictive commerce engine. "We can't rebuild it in time," Stephen whispered. "Titan launches in 48 hours. Then you pay the rent," I said. It took them 45 minutes to break. Gavin tried to bluster. He tried to threaten. He tried to appeal to loyalty and the family we built. "We aren't a family, Gavin," I told him. "We are a corporation, and I am the supplier." The price of steel just went up. The VCs made the call. They weren't going to let the $200 million Titan deal collapse over a founder's ego. They forced Gavin to sign. The ink wasn't even dry when the restructuring began. The VCs, realizing that the current management team had effectively jeopardized the entire company's existence through negligence, called for an immediate executive session. I packed up my laptop while they were still arguing. As I walked out, Marcus tried to catch my eye. He looked like a child who had lost his mother at the grocery store. I didn't acknowledge him. I walked past the glass offices, past the ping-pong table, past the hang-in-their-cat poster. I went to my desk. I didn't pack a box. I didn't take the stapler or the framed photo of my dog. I just took my hard drive. Brittany, the assistant, was crying at her desk. She could sense the bad vibes radiating from the boardroom. "Is everything okay, Natalie?" "Everything is great," Brittany, I said. "By the way, tell Gavin he's out of toner." I walked out of the building and into the Cambridge air. It was cold and smelled like exhaust and river water. It smelled like freedom. By the time I got home, my phone was blowing up, emails from the board. They had fired Marcus, effective immediately, gross incompetence. They were keeping Gavin on as a figurehead for now, but he was being stripped of operational control. They wanted to know if I would come back as CTO. I replied with 2 words, "C agreement." I wasn't coming back. I didn't need to. I was now their largest creditor. Every time they sold a subscription, every time the Titan algorithm predicted a customer wanted a pair of sneakers, a check was generated for Vance Logic LLC. They were doing the work. They were handling the sales, the marketing, the HR headaches, the culture. And I was skimming the cream off the top. 3 months later, I'm sitting in my new home office. It's quiet. No open plans. No espresso machines making noises like dying whales. Just me and my monitors. OmniStream closed their Series D. They got their money. But the valuation was slashed because of the significant IP licensing liability on their books. Gavin is still the CEO on LinkedIn, but I hear he spends most of his time networking because the board won't let him touch anything important. The Titan pilot was a massive success. The algorithm worked perfectly. Of course it did. I wrote it. My first quarterly licensing check arrived yesterday. It was for an obscene amount of money. Enough to buy a very nice house or perhaps a small island where LinkedIn is banned. I ran into Jason, the junior dev, at a coffee shop last week. He told me the vibe at the office is funeral somber. They're terrified of touching the code now. They treat the black box like a holy relic. If it bugs out, they don't try to fix it. They call my consultancy firm, and I charge them $500 an hour to look at it. Marcus is apparently working at a crypto startup now. His bio says he's a visionary architect. God help them. People always say, don't burn bridges, that's bad advice. Sometimes you have to burn the bridge to show people that they were standing on it only because you let them. They thought I was the help. They thought I was the invisible woman who kept the lights on. They forgot that if you control the power grid, you can turn off the sun. I took the check to the bank. The teller asked me what I do for a living. I'm in real estate, I told her. Oh, selling houses? No, I smiled. I rent out logic to people who don't have any. I went home, poured a glass of the really expensive scotch, the kind that tastes like peat moss and victory, and sat down to code. Not for OmniStream, for me. I have a new idea. It's a predictive model for detecting corporate fraud. I think Gavin is going to be my first beta tester. Cheers. Real power doesn't announce itself with bluster. Natalie proved that by letting her crucial algorithm speak for itself, then calmly sliding that document across the table. Holding your cards close isn't weakness, it's strategy. True value always finds its moment to shine. Appreciate you all for sticking through this one. See you in the next story.